Delivery girl found him shot and holding his twins. She didn't know he was the mafia boss. The wind off the Atlantic Ocean whipped through the streets of Harborview like a physical blow, carrying with it a slurry of ice and freezing rain that stung exposed skin. It was nearing midnight on a Tuesday in February, a time when sensible people were tucked under down comforters in heated rooms. Maya Torres was not one of those people. At 25 years old, Maya was currently fighting the handlebars of her rusted moped, her delivery bag strapped heavily to her back, trying to keep the tires from sliding out on a patch of black ice. She was exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. This was her third shift of the day. She had opened the coffee shop at 5 in the morning, worked a lunch rush at a diner until 3 in the afternoon, and had been running deliveries for the Swift Eats app since 6 in the evening. Her bank account balance was currently sitting at $42, and rent was due in 3 days. The GPS on her phone mounted to the handlebars glowed with a destination that made her stomach tighten with a mix of envy and resentment. The Skyline Tower. It was a glass needle piercing the heavy clouds above the wealthy district, a place where the city's elite looked down on the struggling masses. The order was ridiculous. $200 worth of gourmet Italian food from a restaurant that required reservations 3 months in advance. Maya pulled the moped up to the service entrance, her boots squelching in the gray slush. She unhooked the insulated bag, shivering as the cold air found the gaps in her coat. The security guard at the service desk looked her over with bored indifference, checked her ID, and buzzed her toward the freight elevator. The ride up to the penthouse took a long time. Maya watched the floor numbers tick upward on the digital display. 40, 50, 60. When the doors finally slid open, the silence that greeted her was heavy and unnerving. The hallway was lined with plush carpet that swallowed the sound of her footsteps. There was only one door on this floor. It was a massive slab of dark mahogany with a silver handle that looked like it cost more than her moped. She double-checked the app. Penthouse A. This was the place. She reached out to knock, but her knuckles never made contact. The door was already ajar, cracked open by perhaps 2 inches. A cold prickle of unease danced down her spine. In a building with this much security, doors were not left open. She hesitated, shifting the weight of the food bag on her shoulder. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded small in the vast quiet. "Delivery." There was no answer. She should leave. Company policy stated that if a customer did not answer, she should leave the food at the door and take a photo. But as she turned to set the bag down, she heard a sound that stopped her cold. It was a whimper, a low, terrified sound, followed by the hiccuping gasp of a crying child. Maya did not think. Her feet moved before her brain could catch up. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. "Mr. Valenti?" she called out, reading the name from the order receipt. "Is everything okay?" The foyer was larger than her entire apartment. A crystal chandelier hung dim and unlit overhead, casting long, skeletal shadows across the marble floor. To her left, a floor-to-ceiling window showcased the city lights of Harborview, blinking indifferently below. But Maya was not looking at the view. She was looking at the trail of dark drops on the white marble, leading toward the living room. She followed the trail, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The smell hit her next. It was the metallic, copper tang of fresh blood. She rounded the corner into the living room and gasped. Dropping the delivery bag, it hit the floor with a dull thud. Slumped against the far wall beneath a massive abstract painting was a man. He was incredibly handsome in a sharp, severe way, with dark hair falling over his forehead and a jawline that looked carved from granite, but his skin was the color of ash. He wore a white dress shirt that was ruined, soaked through with a blossoming stain of crimson on his left side. He was not alone. Clutched tightly in his arms were 2 toddlers, a boy and a girl who looked no older than 2. They were buried against his chest, their small hands gripping his bloody shirt, their faces streaked with tears. The man had one arm wrapped protectively around both of them, his head lolling forward as he fought to stay conscious. "Oh my God," Maya breathed. She ran to him, sliding on her knees across the hardwood floor. The movement startled the man. His head snapped up, and for a second Maya felt a jolt of pure terror. His eyes were dark, unfocused, and burning with a lethal intensity. He tried to raise his free hand as if to ward her off or strike her, but his limb was too heavy. "Stay back," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "I am here to help," Maya said, her voice shaking but her hands steady. She reached out, her instincts overriding her fear. The children were trembling violently. The little girl let out a fresh wail at the sight of a stranger, burying her face into the man's neck. "You are bleeding," Maya said. She looked around frantically. She needed to stop the blood. She spotted a pristine beige throw blanket on the sofa nearby. She grabbed it, bunching it up in her hands. "I am going to press this against you. It is going to hurt." The man, Lorenzo Enzo Valenti, looked at her with a confusion that was rapidly losing the battle against shock. "Who sent you?" he demanded, though the words lacked power. "Nobody sent me." "I am the delivery girl," Maya said. She pressed the makeshift compress against the wound in his side. Enzo let out a guttural groan. His teeth clenched tight. The sound made the little boy start to cry harder. "Shh! It is okay, baby, it is okay," Maya cooed instinctively, her eyes darting between the man's pale face and the terrified children. She pulled her phone from her pocket with blood-slicked fingers and dialed 911. "No!" Enzo wheezed, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. "No police. Do not call them. You have been shot," Maya said, staring at him. "You are losing a lot of blood, Baitina. You have 2 babies here. I am calling the ambulance." Enzo stared at her, his eyes searching her face. He seemed to be looking for something specific, a threat, a lie, a weapon. He found only fear and determination. His grip on her wrist loosened, his hand falling back to the floor. "Do not let them take my kids," he whispered. The raw desperation in his tone broke her heart. "Who?" Maya asked. "The police?" "Them," he murmured, his eyes fluttering shut for a moment before he forced them open again. "My enemies, the ones who did this. Loyalty is dead. You cannot trust anyone." His words made no sense to her, sounding like the delirious ramblings of a dying man, but the fear in his eyes was lucid. "I will not let anyone hurt them," Maya promised. She put the phone to her ear. "Hello? I need an ambulance. I am at the Skyline Tower, Penthouse A. There is a man here with a gunshot wound. He's losing consciousness." She gave the operator the details, her voice trembling but clear. When she hung up, the silence of the apartment rushed back in, broken only by the whimpering of the twins. Enzo was fading. His breathing was becoming shallow. The hand pressing the blanket to his side was slipping. "Hey, stay with me," Maya said sharply. "Look at me. Look at your kids." She needed to get the weight off his chest. The twins were terrified, but their clinging was making it harder for him to breathe. "Come here, sweetie," Maya said softly to the little girl. "Come here. Daddy needs to breathe." She gently pried the little girl from Enzo's arm. The child resisted at first, screaming, but Maya gathered her close, rocking her against her own chest. The girl smelled like baby shampoo and fear. Maya kept one hand firmly pressing the towel against Enzo's wound and held the toddler with her other arm, humming a low, shapeless tune against the top of the child's head. The little boy refused to let go of his father's shirt, so Maya simply stroked his back, keeping him calm. As they waited, Maya looked around the room properly for the first time. Now that her eyes had adjusted to the dim light, she noticed things she had missed before. The door she had entered through was thick steel disguised as wood. There were cameras blinking in the corners of the ceiling, small red eyes watching their every move. The windows had heavy metal shutters retracted into the frames. This was not just a home, it was a fortress that had been breached. Enzo watched her. Even as his vision grayed at the edges, he could not tear his gaze away from the woman holding his daughter. She was small, dressed in a cheap, wet coat, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with rain, but she was holding the line between him and death. She was rocking his daughter with a natural tenderness that seemed alien in this world of violence. "They are coming," Maya whispered to him. "I can hear the sirens." Enzo tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He just nodded. His eyes locked on hers as if she were the only anchor keeping him from drifting away. When the paramedics burst through the door, followed by 2 uniformed officers, the chaos exploded. "Ma'am, step back," one of the paramedics shouted. "I have his children," Maya yelled back, her protective instinct flaring. "Do not scare them." The paramedics swarmed Enzo, cutting away his shirt, checking vitals, shouting medical terminology that Maya did not understand. The police officers moved toward her. "Miss, you need to hand over the children," one officer said, reaching for the little girl. The child screamed the moment the officer reached for her, a high-pitched shriek of pure terror. She buried her face in Maya's neck, her tiny fingers digging into Maya's skin. The little boy, who'd been pulled away from Enzo by a paramedic, scrambled toward Maya, grabbing her leg. "They do not know you," Maya snapped at the officer, gathering the boy up so she was holding both of them. "They are terrified. I am not leaving them alone." Enzo was being lifted onto a gurney. He was barely conscious, an oxygen mask over his face, but as they wheeled him past, his hand reached out blindly. Maya stepped closer, and his fingers brushed her arm. It was a silent plea. "Remember, don't let them take them. I am coming with him," Maya declared. "We can't authorize a civilian ride-along for a crime scene witness," the officer began. "I am the only one these kids aren't screaming at," Maya shouted, her exhaustion vanishing under a surge of adrenaline. "Do you want to listen to 2 toddlers scream for the entire ride, or do you want me to keep them calm so your medics can save their father?" The paramedic at the back of the ambulance looked at the cop. "Let her in." The guy's heart rate spikes every time he loses sight of the kids. "We need him stable." Maya climbed into the back of the ambulance, sitting on the bench seat, hugging the 2 shivering children. As the vehicle lurched into motion, sirens wailing, she looked down at Enzo. His eyes were open, fixed on her. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. It was not gratitude. It was something deeper, something darker. It was the look of a drowning man watching a lighthouse. The ride to the hospital was a blur of lights and motion. Maya kept whispering to the twins, wiping tears from their cheeks, telling them that Daddy was going to be okay, even though she had no idea if that was true. At the hospital, the chaos shifted from medical urgency to bureaucratic tension. Enzo was rushed into surgery. Maya and the twins were ushered into a private waiting room, separated from the general public. 2 detectives entered the room 20 minutes later. They did not look like the friendly neighborhood cops from television. They wore ill-fitting suits and tired expressions. "I am Detective Miller," the older one said. He had a gray mustache and eyes that had seen too much. "This is Detective Jang. We need to ask you some questions about what you saw at the penthouse." Maya recounted the evening, the delivery, the open door, the blood. She left nothing out, but she noticed the detectives exchanged glances when she mentioned Enzo's name. "Lorenzo Valenti," Miller muttered, scribbling in his notebook. "You have no relation to him. You are just the delivery driver." "Yes," Maya said. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Because—" "Miss Torres," Zhang said quietly, "Lorenzo Valenti is not a man you want to be mixed up with. People around him have a habit of getting hurt or disappearing." Maya looked down at the twins. They had finally fallen asleep, curled up on the waiting room chairs with their heads in her lap. They looked like innocent angels, completely at odds with the ominous warning. "Is he a criminal?" Maya asked. "Let's just say his business is not on the stock market," Miller said. "You walked into a very dangerous situation tonight. You are lucky you walked out." They took her contact information, treating her more like a suspect than a hero, and then left her alone in the room. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the door opened again. This time, it was not the police. 3 men walked in. They were dressed in immaculate black wool coats and tailored suits. They moved with a synchronized grace that was both elegant and terrifying. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. One of the men, a tall figure with slicked-back hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. He looked at the sleeping children, then at Maya. His expression softened, but it did not reach his eyes. "Miss Torres?" he asked. His voice was smooth, like velvet over steel. "Yes," Maya whispered, instinctively placing a hand over the little boy's back. "My name is Nico. I work for Mr. Valenti," he said. "We are here to take the children home to their grandparents." Maya hesitated. The police had warned her, but these men carried an air of authority that the police lacked. And she was just a delivery girl. She had no legal right to these children. "Is he okay?" Maya asked. "Mr. Valenti. He's out of surgery. He's stable," Nico said. "He told us what you did." Nico reached into his inner coat pocket. Maya flinched, her heart leaping into her throat, but he only withdrew a thick white envelope and a sleek black business card. He held them out to her. "Mr. Valenti appreciates your discretion," Nico said, placing emphasis on the word discretion. "He wants to ensure you are compensated for your time and the trauma of the evening." Maya took the envelope. It felt heavy. Nico signaled to the other two men, who moved forward to gently pick up the sleeping twins. The children stirred but did not wake, likely exhausted from the crying. Maya felt a sudden, sharp pang of loss as the warmth of the children left her. "Thank you. Miss Torres," Nico said. "We will take it from here. Do not speak to the press. It would be unwise." With that, they turned and left, taking the children and the strange, dark energy with them. Maya stood alone in the sterile waiting room. She looked down at the envelope in her hand. She opened the flap and looked inside. It was full of $100 bills, a thick stack. She quickly thumbed through it. It had to be $5,000, maybe more. It was more money than she had made in the last 4 months combined. She looked at the black card. It had no logo, just a name, Valenti Enterprises, and a phone number embossed in silver. Maya walked out of the hospital and into the biting cold of the night. The winter storm had not let up. The wind tore at her coat, freezing the tears she hadn't realized she was crying. She gripped the envelope tightly in her pocket. She should throw the card away. She should take the money, pay her rent, pay her mother's medical bills, and never think about the man with the dark eyes and the blood-soaked shirt again. The detective was right. That world was poison. But as she trudged toward the bus stop, the image of Enzo Valenti's desperate face and the feel of his daughter's small hand gripping her shirt would not leave her mind. She had stepped into a nightmare, yet for some reason, standing there in the freezing sleet, the normal world felt gray and empty by comparison. Maya looked at the card one last time before tucking it deep into her pocket. She did not know it yet, but the delivery was not over. It had only just begun. 3 days had passed since the night at the Skyline Tower, and the city of Harborview was still locked in the jaws of a relentless freeze. The slush on the sidewalks had hardened into treacherous ridges of gray ice, and the wind bit through layers of clothing with cruel indifference. Maya Torres trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment building, her legs burning with a familiar ache. It had been another double shift. Her back throbbed where the heavy delivery bag usually rested, though today she had left it locked to her moped downstairs. The envelope of cash from the hospital was hidden deep inside her mattress, a secret that felt both like a lifeline and a ticking bomb. She had not spent a dime of it yet. It felt dirty, or perhaps dangerous, like touching it might summon the dark-eyed men back into her life. She reached her landing, fumbling for her keys with numb fingers, looking forward to nothing more than hot instant noodles and sleep. But when she looked up, her heart stopped in her chest. Leaning against the wall next to her peeling green door was a man. He was not a neighbor. He wore a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than the entire building, and his leather gloves were pristine. It was one of the men from the hospital, not the terrifying one named Nico, but one of the silent sentinels who had stood behind him. Maya froze, her key half inserted in the lock. "Miss Torres," the man said. His voice was polite, low, and completely devoid of warmth. "What do you want?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best effort to sound tough. She took a step back, gripping her keys like a weapon. "I have not told anyone. I swear." The man smiled, a tight, practiced expression that did not reach his eyes. "We know. If you had spoken to the press, we would be having a very different conversation." Maya swallowed hard. "Then why are you here, mister?" "Valenti would like to thank you properly," the man said. He gestured toward the stairwell. "He has a proposition for you, a job opportunity." "I already have a job," Maya said quickly. "Two. Actually." The man tilted his head, his expression almost pitying. "Delivering food in a blizzard, mister. Valenti believes you are overqualified for such arduous work. He would like to speak with you. Tonight." "I am tired," Maya said. "Can I go tomorrow?" It was not a request, the man said softly. The threat was not in his volume, but in the absolute certainty of his tone. There was a black sedan idling at the curb downstairs. The engine was running. Maya looked at her door, then at the man. She realized with a sinking feeling that she did not really have a choice. The envelope in her mattress, the card in her pocket. She had already let the vampire in. Now she had to deal with the consequences. "Fine," she whispered. "Let me just put my bag down." The drive took 40 minutes. They left the cramped, graffiti-stained streets of her neighborhood and ascended into the hills outside Harborview, where the houses grew larger and the fences grew higher. The sedan turned onto a private road that wound through a dense forest of pine trees, heavy with snow. They stopped before a massive iron gate. Cameras mounted on stone pillars swiveled to track the car. The driver lowered his window and punched a code into a keypad. The gate swung open with a heavy, hydraulic hum. Maya pressed her face against the cold glass. The estate was like a fortress. 12-foot walls topped with what looked like electrified wire surrounded the perimeter. Floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the grounds where she saw men patrolling with German shepherds. This was not just wealth. This was a siege mentality. The main house was a sprawling mansion of stone and glass, modern yet imposing. The car pulled up to the front entrance, and the man in the wool coat opened her door. "This way, Miss Torres, inside." The house was silent and warm. The floors were heated slate, and the air smelled of cedar and expensive leather. Maya felt painfully out of place in her worn jeans and oversized sweater. She followed the guard through a long hallway lined with artwork that looked like it belonged in a museum. They entered a large, sunlit room at the back of the house. It was a solarium, with glass walls looking out over the snowy grounds. Despite the late hour, the room was warm and softly lit by floor lamps. Lorenzo Enzo Valenti was sitting in a leather armchair, watching a scene that seemed impossible given the violence of their first meeting. On a plush rug in the center of the room, the two toddlers were building a tower out of soft, colorful blocks. Enzo was dressed in gray sweatpants and a black sweater, his left arm immobilized in a complex black sling strapped to his chest. He looked better than he had at the penthouse. The gray pallor was gone, replaced by a healthier olive tone, but he still looked weary. There were dark circles under his eyes and a tightness in his jaw that spoke of lingering pain. "Maya?" Enzo stood up as she entered. His voice was deep, rougher than she remembered, but steady. Maya stopped near the doorway, clutching her hands together. "Mr. Valenti, please call me Enzo," he said. He gestured to the guard, who nodded and silently backed out of the room, closing the heavy oak door with a soft click. They were alone, save for the children. Enzo walked toward her. He moved with a slight limp, favoring his left side. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face with an intensity that made Maya want to look away, but she held her ground. "I wanted to thank you," Enzo said. "I know my associate gave you money at the hospital, but that was a transaction. This is personal." "You do not have to thank me," Maya said. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Enzo said, shaking his head. "Most people would have run. Most people would have seen the blood and the gun and run the other way. You stayed, you saved my life, Maya, but more importantly, you kept my children safe." He looked over his shoulder at the twins, the little boy, seeing Maya, suddenly dropped his block and scrambled to his feet. He toddled over to her, grabbing the fabric of her jeans with a sticky hand. "Up!" the boy demanded. "Leo," Enzo warned gently. "Leave her alone." "It is okay," Maya said automatically. She reached down and picked the boy up. He immediately rested his head on her shoulder, letting out a contented sigh. A moment later, the little girl abandoned her blocks and came over, hugging Maya's leg and looking up with wide, expecting eyes. Enzo watched the scene, his expression unreadable. "They have not been sleeping well since that night," he said quietly. "They cry for hours. But the moment you walked in, look at them." Maya smoothed the little boy's hair. "They are just scared. They know things are wrong." "I know," Enzo said. He walked over to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. "That is why I brought you here. I have a proposition." "The guard mentioned a job," Maya said. "I need a caregiver for them," Enzo said, turning back to face her. "My previous nanny." She left. Suddenly, "I need someone who can live here, someone who can be with them 24/7. I cannot send them to daycare. Not right now. It is too dangerous." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter draft. Dangerous? Why? Because of the people who shot you. Enzo's eyes hardened slightly. "Because of my business. There are people who would use them to get to me. I need someone I can trust, someone who has already proven they will protect them when things get ugly." "I am not a bodyguard," Maya said. "I am a delivery driver." "You are the only person they seem to trust," Enzo countered, "and you kept your head in a crisis. That is worth more to me than a resume full of degrees." He named a salary. It was a number so large that Maya thought she had misheard him. It was $5,000 a week, plus room and board. Maya nearly dropped Leo. That is insane. "It is hazard pay," Enzo said bluntly. "I will not lie to you. Maya, living here comes with risks. We are in a difficult period. You would be confined to the estate. You could not bring guests. You would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that is thicker than a Bible." Maya looked at him. He was offering her a golden cage. "I cannot," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I have a life. I have an apartment. You have 3 jobs and you are still behind on rent," Enzo said. He saw her surprise and shrugged. "I had you vetted. I know about your mother in Arizona. I know about her medical bills. I know you send her 80% of what you make." Maya felt a flash of anger. "You spied on me?" "I did my due diligence," Enzo corrected. "If you take this job, you can pay off your mother's medical debt in 3 months. You can quit the delivery apps. You can sleep for more than 4 hours a night." It was a cruel temptation. He was holding the solution to every single one of her problems in his hand, but the price was entering his world completely. "Why me?" Maya asked. "You could hire a professional security team for that money." "I have security," Enzo said. "I have men with guns at every gate, but my children do not need another man with a gun. They need softness. They need someone who looks at them and sees children, not assets to be guarded." He took a step closer. The air between them felt suddenly charged, heavy with the memory of the ambulance ride, the way he had looked at her while he bled. "Give me a month," Enzo said. "A trial period. If you hate it, you walk away with $20,000 and no hard feelings." Maya looked down at Leo, who was half asleep on her shoulder. She looked at the little girl hugging her leg. She thought about her mother, coughing in a trailer in Phoenix, unable to afford the specialist she needed. She looked at Enzo. He was dangerous. Everything about him screamed danger, but he was also a father who looked at his children with a desperate, terrifying love. "1 month," Maya whispered. 1 month. Enzo agreed. The transition was jarring. Maya packed her meager belongings into 2 suitcases and was moved into the estate the next morning. Her room was in the east wing, down the hall from the nursery. It was beautiful, with a 4-poster bed and a private bathroom that was larger than her old kitchen, but it felt like a hotel room, impersonal, cold. Nico, the head of security, gave her the orientation. He was a terrifying man, efficient and humorless. "Rule 1, Nico said as they walked down a corridor lined with locked doors. "You stick to the east wing and the common areas. The west wing is Mr. Valenti's private quarters and his office. You do not go there unless summoned. Maya nodded, trying to memorize the layout. Rule 2, Nico continued. No questions. You do not ask about the visitors who come and go. You do not ask about the deliveries to the garage. You do not ask about where Mr. Valenti goes at night. You are here for the twins. That is it. Understood, Maya said. Rule 3. Nico stopped and turned to her, his eyes cold. If we say move, you move. If we say hide, you hide. Security protocols are not suggestions. They are the only thing keeping you breathing. Do we understand each other? Yes, Maya said. The first few days passed in a blur of luxury and tension. Maya fell into a routine with the twins, Leo and Sophia. They were sweet, energetic children who seemed starving for attention. Enzo was largely absent, disappearing into the West Wing for hours at a time, emerging only for brief, silent meals or to kiss the children goodnight. But the house felt like a coiled spring. The guards were always watching. The phones were always ringing in distant rooms. On her 4th night, sleep was impossible. The silence of the countryside was too loud compared to the city traffic she was used to. Around 2 a.m, Maya gave up. She put on her robe over her pajamas and crept down the hallway toward the kitchen, desperate for a glass of water. The house was dark, the moonlight spilling through the high windows and silver pools. Maya walked softly, her bare feet silent on the floor. When she reached the kitchen archway, she stopped. Enzo was there. He was standing at the massive marble island, his back to her. The lights were dim, just the under-cabinet lighting casting a warm glow over the counter. He had shed the sling for the moment, perhaps to stretch the muscle, and his left arm hung stiffly at his side. He was struggling to open a tin of loose-leaf tea with one hand. He wore only a white t-shirt and pajama pants. The bandage on his side was visible beneath the thin fabric of the shirt, a stark square of white. But what caught Maya's eye were the scars. His arms were a map of violence, faded white lines, jagged puckered marks of old burns or cuts. She should leave. Rule 1, stay in her lane. But then the tea tin slipped from his grasp and clattered loudly onto the counter. Enzo let out a hiss of frustration. Leaning his forehead against the cabinet, he looked utterly defeated. Need a hand? Maya asked softly. Enzo spun around, his right hand instinctively reaching for his waistband where a gun would be, before he realized he was unarmed and in his own kitchen. He relaxed, but only slightly. Maya, he breathed. I did not hear you. I have had practice walking quietly lately, she said, stepping into the room. She walked to the island, picked up the tin, and twisted the lid off effortlessly. She set it down in front of him. Chamomile? Please, he said. She busied herself with the kettle, filling it and setting it on the stove. The domesticity of the moment felt strange, fragile. Here she was, standing in her pajamas with a mafia boss, making tea in the middle of the night. Could not sleep? Enzo asked. He leaned against the counter, watching her. It is too quiet here, Maya admitted. I am used to sirens and garbage trucks. The silence? It makes me think too much. Enzo let out a short, humorless laugh. I know the feeling. Silence is where the ghosts live. Maya turned to look at him. He looked younger tonight, stripped of the suits and the armor of command. He looked like a man who was just tired. How is the arm? She asked. It throbs, he said. But the doctor says I am lucky. Another inch to the right and I would not be worrying about tea. Maya leaned against the island opposite him. Why do you do it? She asked before she could stop herself. Enzo stiffened. That sounds like a question. Maya, Nico told you the rules. I am not asking about the business, Maya said, emboldened by the late hour. I am asking about you. You have 2 beautiful kids. You have enough money to buy a small country. Why stay in a life that involves getting shot in your own living room? Enzo looked down at his hands. He traced a scar on his knuckle with his thumb. It is not a job you put in 2 weeks' notice for. Maya, it is a legacy. My father built this. His father built this. It is in the blood. Blood washes off, Maya said quietly. Enzo looked up, his eyes meeting hers. Not this kind. This kind stains. The kettle whistled, a low, rising shriek that broke the tension. Maya poured the water into 2 mugs. She slid one across the marble to him. "Thank you," he said. He took a sip, the steam curling around his face. "You are good with them. The twins, they are good kids," Maya said. "They miss their mom." The words hung in the air. Maya immediately regretted them. She knew from the file Nico had made her sign that Enzo was a widower, but the details were non-existent. "She died when they were 6 months old," Enzo said, his voice void of emotion. "Car accident, that is the official story." "And the unofficial one?" Maya dared to ask. Enzo's jaw tightened. "Bad choices. Mine." He took a sip of tea, his gaze distant. "I thought I could keep the 2 worlds separate. I thought I could come home, wash my hands and be a husband, a father. But you are right, the stain does not wash off. It spreads." He looked at Maya then. Really looked at her. "You should not be here. Maya, you are light, you are normal. Being here, being near me, it will dim you." "I can handle myself," Maya said. "I have been taking care of myself since I was 16. Enzo set his mug down. He moved around the island, stepping into her space. He did not touch her, but he was close enough that she could smell the soap on his skin and the chamomile tea. "You have no idea what you are handling," he whispered. He reached out, his hand hovering for a second before his fingers brushed against her hand resting on the countertop. The contact was electric. Maya felt a jolt run straight up her arm, settling as a heavy heat in her stomach. She looked up at him. His eyes were dark, dilated. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was something else. Hunger. Not for food, but for connection. For the light he claimed she had. Maya held her breath. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin. Enzo's gaze dropped to her lips, lingered there, and for a terrifying, thrilling second. She thought he was going to kiss her. Her body leaned in, a fraction of an inch, an unconscious invitation. Enzo's hand tightened on the counter, his jaw clenched. He pulled back abruptly, creating a chasm of distance between them. "I cannot afford distractions," he said, his voice rough. "Not now." He turned his back on her, picking up his mug. "Go to bed, Maya." Maya stood there for a moment, her skin still tingling where he had almost touched her, her face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and confusion. Without a word, she turned and fled the kitchen, the sound of her own heart deafening in her ears. The next morning, the fragility of the night before had vanished, replaced by the cold reality of Enzo's world. Maya was in the hallway with the twins, heading toward the playroom, when the door to Enzo's office in the West Wing flew open. Voices spilled out, angry and loud. "He's pushing into the chaotic waterfront territories," a man's voice shouted. "If we do not hit back now, Rossi will think we are bleeding out. Enough!" Enzo's voice cut through the shouting like a whip crack. "I will not start a war in the streets while the police are watching my every move. We wait. We secure the assets." Enzo stepped out of the office, followed by Nico and 2 other men. Enzo looked furious. His face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes hard as flint. He looked nothing like the man who had drunk tea in his pajamas. He looked like a killer. Then he looked up and saw Maya. She was freezing, holding Leo's hand, Sophia on her hip. She had heard the words, "Rossi, territory, hit." For a second, Enzo's eyes were deadly. He looked at her as a liability, a witness. But then his gaze shifted to the twins. The ice in his face cracked. The tension in his shoulders dropped an inch. He took a breath, physically forcing the violence back down into the box. "Take them to the playroom, Maya," he said, his voice controlled but not unkind. "Stay there until I say otherwise." "Yes, sir," Maya whispered. She hurried the children down the hall, feeling his eyes on her back until she turned the corner. That night, Maya tucked the twins into their cribs. She turned on the nightlight, a spinning globe of stars that cast constellations on the ceiling. She sat in the rocking chair in the corner, watching them sleep, The house was locked down. The alarms were set. There were men with assault rifles walking the perimeter of the snow-covered grounds. She was safer here than she had ever been in her drafty apartment with the broken lock. Her mother's medical bills were paid for the month. Her debts were vanishing. But as she listened to the wind howl outside the thick glass, she felt the walls closing in. She was living in the center of a target, and the man holding the shield was the most dangerous thing of all. She touched her hand, the spot where his fingers had brushed hers. Her heart sped up at the memory, a treacherous, thumping rhythm. She was trapped by the danger, trapped by the children's need, and God help her, trapped by the pull of a man who had warned her that he would destroy her light. Maya closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the chair. She was in too deep, and she knew it. And the terrifying part was, she did not want to leave. The atmosphere inside the Valenti estate had shifted. If the first week had been a tense but polite introduction to a wealthy lifestyle, the second week felt like living inside a pressurized cabin. The air was thick with unsaid words and sharp glances. Maya noticed the changes immediately. The rotation of the guards had doubled. New faces appeared at the breakfast table, men with harder eyes and thicker necks than the previous security team. They did not smile at the twins. They scanned the perimeter of the dining room as if anticipating an invasion through the French doors. Even the rhythm of the house had broken. Deliveries were rerouted to a secondary service entrance that was heavily fortified. Nico, the head of security, was constantly pacing the hallways, speaking in low, rapid bursts into his radio headset. Every time a phone buzzed, 3 people would check their pockets simultaneously. Enzo was the eye of the storm. He was calmer than the others, but it was a terrifying kind of calm. It was the stillness of a predator waiting in the long grass. He spent hours in his office, the door firmly shut, and when he emerged, he looked through people rather than at them. One morning, as Maya was wiping oatmeal off Leo's chin, Enzo walked into the kitchen. He was dressed in a suit, ignoring the sling for his arm, though he held the limb stiffly against his side. "We are changing the protocols," Enzo said without preamble. "No more walks in the garden near the south wall. Use the courtyard only." Maya paused, the washcloth hovering near Leo's face. "Is something wrong? Everyone is acting like we are under siege. There have been threats," Enzo said. He poured himself a black coffee. His movements precise, credible ones. "But you and the twins are safe. The walls are high. Maya, nothing gets in here unless I allow it." His voice was steady, but his eyes told a different story. They were darting to the windows, checking the sightlines. He was lying, or at least he was only telling her the fraction of the truth he thought she could handle. The confinement began to wear on the children. By Thursday, the twins were restless, prone to tantrums and tears. The courtyard was cold and shadowed by the high walls, and they needed sunlight. "I am taking them to Greystone Park," Maya announced that afternoon. Enzo looked up from his tablet, sitting in the library. "Absolutely not. It is a private park." "Enzo," Maya argued, her hands on her hips. "It requires a membership key card. You have one. I saw it in the drawer. It is 5 miles away. It is fenced. They need to run, or they are going to tear this house down brick by brick." Enzo stared at her for a long moment. He looked at the twins, who were currently wrestling on the Persian rug, screaming with cabin fever. He rubbed his temples. "Fine," he said. "But you take the armored SUV. You take Russo as your driver and distinct protection detail. You stay for 45 minutes, not a minute longer." The park was a manicured stretch of land reserved for the ultra-wealthy residents of the hills. It was surrounded by an iron fence and required a key fob to enter. It was empty when they arrived, save for a nanny pushing a stroller on the far side of the duck pond. The air was crisp and cold, but the sun was shining. Maya felt the tension in her shoulders loosen slightly as Leo and Sophia ran toward the playground equipment, their laughter ringing out in the clear air. Russo, a burly guard with a scar through his eyebrow, stood by the gate, scanning the area with professional boredom. Maya pushed Sophia on the swing while Leo dug happily in the pristine wood chips. For 20 minutes, It felt like a normal life, just a woman and 2 children enjoying a winter afternoon. Then, the gate clicked. Maya looked up instinctively. A man in a jogging suit entered. He had a hood pulled up against the cold, his face obscured by sunglasses. He did not look like the other residents. He moved with too much purpose. Maya felt a prickle of unease. She stopped the swing. "Russo," she called out softly. Russo was already moving. He had stepped away from the fence, positioning himself between the jogger and the playground. "Sir, this is a private residence park," Russo said, his voice carrying across the grass. "Do you have a fob?" The man ignored him. He broke into a sprint, heading straight for the sandbox where Leo was sitting. "Leo!" Maya screamed. Abandoning Sophia and bolting toward the boy, Russo drew his weapon, a dark shape in his hand. But he hesitated. The man was unarmed and running toward a child. Shooting could hit the boy. In that split second of hesitation, the attacker shoved past Russo, knocking the guard off balance with surprising strength. The man reached the sandbox. He grabbed Leo by the back of his coat, hauling the toddler into the air like a sack of flour. Leo shrieked, a sound of pure terror that tore through Maya's heart. "No!" Maya yelled, throwing herself forward before she could reach them. A black blur exploded from the tree line near the parking lot. It was Enzo. He had not been in the car. He had not been at the house. He had been watching them from the shadows the entire time. He hit the attacker with the force of a freight train. There was a sickening crunch of bone as Enzo tackled the man, driving him into the frozen earth. Leo was dropped in the chaos, landing softly in the wood chips, wailing. Maya scooped Leo up instantly, dragging him back, shielding his body with hers. She looked up, gasping for air. Enzo was not fighting. He was dismantling the man. His injured arm seemed forgotten. He pinned the attacker to the ground with a knee to the chest, his good hand delivering 2 short, brutal strikes to the man's face that rendered him limp instantly. It was efficient, practiced, and terrifyingly violent. Enzo stood up, his chest heaving. His face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes devoid of humanity. He looked like a monster. He pulled his phone from his pocket and barked a single command. "Clear it, now." Within seconds, 2 black SUVs screeched into the parking lot. Men swarmed the park. They grabbed the unconscious attacker and dragged him toward a van. Russo was shouting orders. Enzo turned to Maya. The monster vanished, replaced by the father. "Are they hurt?" he demanded, rushing to her. Maya was shaking so hard she could barely hold Leo. Sophia was clinging to her leg, sobbing. You were here," Maya stammered. "Get in the car," Enzo ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Now. The ride back to the estate was suffocating. The windows were tinted so dark it felt like night inside the vehicle. Leo and Sophia had cried themselves into exhaustion and were whimpering softly in their car seats. Maya sat next to them, staring at Enzo. He sat in the front passenger seat, staring straight ahead, wiping a smear of blood from his knuckles with a handkerchief. "Who was that?" Maya asked. Her voice was thin, sharp. "Nobody," Enzo said. "Do not lie to me," Maya shouted, making the driver flinch. "A stranger just tried to kidnap your son in a locked park." That was not a random crazy person. He knew exactly who to grab. Enzo did not turn around. "It is handled." "Maya, handled?" Maya let out a hysterical laugh. "You beat a man unconscious in front of your children. You were hiding in the bushes like a stalker. Who are you?" "Enzo. What kind of business has enemies who try to steal toddlers? We will discuss this at the house," Enzo said, his voice low and dangerous. "No, we will discuss this now." Enzo turned around then. His eyes were blazing. "We are discussing nothing until we are behind the gates." Silence. The command was so absolute that Maya's mouth snapped shut. She sat back, trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. She looked at the man she had made tea for, the man she had started to trust. He was a stranger again, a dangerous stranger. When they arrived at the estate, the lockdown was total. The gates slammed shut with a finality that felt like a prison sentence. Enzo disappeared into his office with Nico and the captured man, leaving Maya to settle the traumatized children. It took hours to get the twins to sleep. They woke up screaming every time a floorboard creaked. Maya lay between their cribs on the rug, singing lullabies until her throat was raw. When they finally succumbed to deep sleep, it was past 10 at night. Maya walked to her room. She felt cold, inside and out. The image of the man grabbing Leo played on a loop in her mind. She sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. The detective's words from the hospital echoed in her memory. Not a man you want to be mixed up with. She opened the search browser. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a second. Trembling. Then, she typed, Lorenzo Valenti. The results flooded the screen. Valenti Syndicate linked to Port Authority corruption. 3 dead in Harborview warehouse fire. Police suspect mob war. The Valenti family. A history of organized crime in the Northeast. Lorenzo Valenti, suspected head of Valenti crime family. Questioned in RICO case. Maya clicked on an article from a year ago. There was a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but it was him, Enzo, wearing a black coat, standing at a funeral for a man the article identified as his father, a notorious crime boss. Money laundering, extortion, arms trafficking, disappearances. The articles were filled with words like ruthless, untouchable, and lethal. Maya felt sick. The nausea rolled in her stomach. She wasn't working for a wealthy businessman with shady rivals. She was working for the godfather of Harborview. She was living in the headquarters of a criminal empire. She grabbed the laptop. She didn't think. She just moved. She marched down the hallway to the West Wing. The guard at the end of the hall stepped forward to stop her. "Get out of my way," Maya hissed. The guard hesitated, seeing the look on her face. "Let her through," Enzo's voice called from behind the double doors. Maya pushed the doors open. Enzo was sitting behind a massive oak desk. The room was dark, lit only by a single lamp and the dying embers of a fire in the hearth. He was pouring a glass of amber liquid. His jacket was off, his tie undone. He looked exhausted. Maya marched up to the desk and slammed the laptop down, the screen facing him. "Is this true?" she demanded. Enzo didn't look at the screen. He took a sip of his drink. "You know the answer." "Maya, say it," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to hear you say it. I am the head of the Valenti family." Enzo said quietly. "I run the syndicate, and the man at the park, a soldier for the Rossi family. They are trying to squeeze us out of the waterfront. They thought taking my son would give them leverage." Maya stared at him. "You brought me here. You brought me into a war zone. You let me believe you were just complicated. You are a criminal. Enzo. You are the bad guy." Enzo stood up slowly. "I never said I was a good man. Maya, I told you I had enemies. You almost got Leo killed," Maya shouted. She felt tears pricking her eyes, tears of anger, of betrayal. "I am leaving. I am packing my things, and I am calling the police, and I am getting out of here." Enzo moved so fast she didn't see him coming. He rounded the desk and was in front of her in a heartbeat. "You cannot leave," he said, his voice low and intense. "Watch me," Maya challenged. "If you walk out that gate, you are dead." Enzo said. He wasn't threatening her. He was stating a fact. "The Rossis saw you at the park. They know you are the caregiver. They know you are close to the children. If you leave my protection, they will take you. They will torture you to find out the security codes to this house." Maya recoiled as if he had slapped her. "You trapped me." "I protected you," Enzo roared, his composure finally cracking. He slammed his hand onto the desk, making the lamp rattle. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I want my children to grow up surrounded by guards? I do everything, every bloody, terrible thing to keep them alive." He stepped closer, crowding her space. His eyes were wild, blazing with a mixture of rage and desperation. "I did not ask for this life," Enzo whispered, his voice dropping to a rough rasp. "I was born into it, and now I am trying to claw my way out without getting my family slaughtered. And you are the only good thing that has walked into this house in years." Maya stared up at him. She should be terrified. He was a killer. The internet said he was a monster. But standing inches from him, seeing the raw agony in his eyes, she didn't feel fear. She felt an overwhelming surge of adrenaline. "You have no right," she whispered, though the fight was draining out of her, replaced by something hotter, heavier. "I have every right to protect what is mine," Enzo said. They were standing so close their chests were almost touching. Maya could feel the heat radiating off him. She could smell the whiskey on his breath, mixed with the scent of rain and violence. The air between them crackled, charged with the same electricity that had been in the kitchen, but magnified 1,000 times by the danger. "You are insane," Maya breathed. She shoved him. It was a shove of frustration, of confusion, of wanting to push him away and pull him closer all at once. Enzo caught her wrists. His grip was iron. He didn't push her back. He pulled her in. The contact sent a jolt through Maya's body that made her knees weak. Enzo pulled her until her body was pressed against his. He looked down at her, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. His thumb moved, almost unconsciously, stroking the sensitive skin on the inside of her wrist. It was a caress, startlingly gentle against the force of his grip. For a second, the world narrowed down to the two of them. The sounds of the house faded, the threat of the Rossis faded. There was only the heat of his body, the hardness of his chest, and the look of raw hunger in his eyes. He wanted her. The realization hit Maya like a physical blow, and God help her, she wanted him. She wanted the man who would burn the world down to save his children. Enzo leaned down. His breath ghosted over her lips. Maya parted hers, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Then, Enzo froze. He squeezed her wrists one last time, hard, and then released her as if she burned him. He stepped back, putting 3 feet of distance between them. He ran a hand through his hair, turning his face away. "Get out," he rasped. "Enzo," Maya whispered, reaching out. "Go to your room, Maya," he said, his back to her. His shoulders were heaving. "Before I do something that we can't undo." Maya stood there for a moment, her body humming with rejected energy. She looked at his broad back, at the tension in his frame. She turned and walked out of the office, leaving the door open behind her. She didn't go to her room. She couldn't. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins. She walked down the hall to the nursery. She needed to see the twins. She needed to remind herself why she was here. She pushed the door open quietly. Enzo was already there. He must have taken the back hallway. He was sitting on the floor between the 2 cribs, his back against the wall, his long legs stretched out in front of him. The room was bathed in the soft blue light of the star projector. He didn't look up when she entered. He was staring at the cribs, his expression one of utter defeat. He looked stripped raw. The powerful mafia boss was gone. In his place was a man who was terrified he was going to fail the only people who mattered. Maya hesitated, then walked into the room. She didn't speak. She sat down on the floor next to him, close enough that their arms were almost touching, but not quite. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping children and the hum of the heater. "You were right," Enzo said softly into the darkness, "about the park. I should have told you. You should have." Maya agreed. "I am sorry," he said. Maya looked at him. His profile was sharp against the blue light. He looked lonely. A profound, aching loneliness that matched the one she had carried since she left home at 18. "We are not leaving," Maya said quietly. Enzo turned his head to look at her. His eyes were guarded. "I am not leaving the twins," she clarified. "If the Rossis are out there, they need someone here, someone who isn't holding a gun." Enzo let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. Thank you, he didn't reach for her this time. He just sat there, and Maya sat with him. The proximity was tense, heavy with the memory of what had almost happened in the office, but it was also softer. It was a truce. As Maya finally went back to her own room an hour later, she lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her heart was still racing. She had found out he was a criminal. She had found out he was dangerous. She had seen him commit violence, and instead of running, she'd almost kissed him. She turned over, burying her face in the pillow. She wasn't just staying for the twins anymore. She was drawn to the darkness. She was drawn to the way he looked at her, like she was the only clean thing in a dirty world. It terrified her. It excited her. And she knew. with a sinking certainty that this was going to end in heartbreak or blood. But she wasn't going anywhere. The days following the attack at the park bled into a monotonous gray haze of confinement. The Valenti estate, once a place of luxurious mystery, had transformed into a high-security prison. The gates remained permanently sealed, bolted shut against the outside world. New guards patrolled the perimeter with restless energy, their breath puffing in the freezing winter air. While the security system chimed constantly with status updates that echoed through the marble hallways, Maya felt the walls closing in. She was used to the chaotic freedom of the city, the ability to walk out her front door and disappear into a crowd. Now, her world was reduced to the nursery, the kitchen, and the small courtyard where the twins were allowed to play under the watchful eyes of armed men. She resented the restrictions, the feeling of being a bird in a gilded cage, but her anger always evaporated the moment she saw Enzo with his children. He had changed since the park. The distant, brooding figure had been replaced by a fiercely protective father who seemed unable to let the twins out of his sight for more than an hour. One evening, Maya stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching a scene that tugged painfully at her heart. Enzo was sitting in the oversized rocking chair, with Leo on one knee and Sophia on the other. He was reading a battered copy of a children's book about a runaway bunny. His deep, gravelly voice softened into a gentle rumble. "If you run away, I will run after you," Enzo read, his finger tracing the pictures for them. "For you are my little bunny." He paused, pressing a kiss to the top of Sophia's head, inhaling the scent of her hair with a look of such profound relief that it made Maya's throat tight. He looked up and caught Maya watching him. For a second, his guard dropped completely, and she saw the exhaustion and the fear he kept hidden behind his stoic mask. He offered her a tired, crooked smile, and the resentment she felt about the lockdown vanished, replaced by a warm, aching sympathy. The weather turned violent 2 nights later. A massive winter storm rolled in off the Atlantic, hammering Harborview with sleet and gale-force winds. The estate groaned under the assault, the wind howling around the stone corners like a wounded animal. Around midnight, the lights in the east wing flickered once, twice, and then died completely. Maya was in the hallway, heading back to her room after checking on the sleeping twins. The sudden darkness was absolute, heavy and suffocating. A moment later, the backup generators kicked in with a distant hum, and the emergency lights along the baseboards flared to life. They cast the corridor in a dim, red-tinged glow, throwing long, distorted shadows against the walls. She took a step forward and nearly collided with a solid shape in the dark. Gasps of surprise echoed from both of them. "Maya?" Enzo's voice came from the shadows, sharp with adrenaline. "It is me," Maya said, pressing a hand to her chest. "I was just checking on the kids. The power went out." "I know," Enzo said. His voice was closer now. A tree took out the main line on the private road. "We are running on generators." His figure stepped into the pool of red light. He was wearing a white dress shirt, the top buttons undone. His sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark ink of a tattoo on his forearm and the thick bandage still wrapping his healing ribs. In the eerie lighting, his eyes looked black, intense, and unreadable. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning her face. "You are trembling. It is just the cold," Maya lied, "and the dark. It is spooky in here." Enzo let out a short, humorless laugh. "It is just a house. Maya, the ghosts are not in the walls. They are in our heads." He moved to walk past her, but the hallway was narrow, and he stopped, hesitating. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the window pane at the end of the hall with the sound of gravel being thrown against glass. The atmosphere in the corridor thickened, charged with the sudden proximity and the isolation of the storm. Maya didn't move. She looked up at him, studying the sharp lines of his face, the tension that never seemed to leave his jaw. "You never told me," she whispered, "about your wife." Enzo went perfectly still. The air between them seemed to freeze. "Who told you?" "Nico mentioned she died in an accident," Maya said, her voice soft. "But the other night, in the office." You said everything you do is to keep the twins alive. You looked like you were remembering something terrible." Enzo looked away, staring at the rain-streaked window. The red light cast half his face in shadow, making him look like a statue carved from grief. "It was not an accident," he said, his voice devoid of inflection, which made it all the more terrifying. "It was an ambush. We were leaving a restaurant. It was our anniversary. They were aiming for me." Maya covered her mouth with her hand, a small sound of horror escaping her throat. "I bent down to tie my shoe." Enzo continued, his eyes vacant, seeing a different time. "The bullet missed me by inches. It hit Elena instead. She died in my arms on the sidewalk while the sirens were still miles away." He turned back to Maya, his expression fracturing. "I swore that night that I would never let anyone get that close again. Love is not a gift in my world. Maya, it is a target. It is a weapon they use to gut you." The pain in his voice was so raw, so visceral, that Maya moved without thinking. She stepped toward him, closing the small distance between them. "Enzo." She breathed. She raised her hand and placed it gently against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel the steady, heavy thud of it beneath the cotton of his shirt, beating against her palm. She could feel the ridge of a scar beneath the fabric, a physical map of his history of violence. Enzo looked down at her hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her hand with his own, his fingers rough and warm, trapping her palm against his chest. He closed his eyes for a moment, his head bowing, as if the contact was the only thing keeping him upright. It looked like comfort, but it felt like torture. "You should not touch me," he whispered, his voice rough. "I am poison, Maya. I told you." "I am not afraid of you," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. "You should be." He opened his eyes. They were dark, swirling with a storm that matched the one outside. Desire and fear warred in his gaze. He looked at her mouth, then at her eyes, searching for a reason to stop, searching for her to run. But she didn't run. She leaned in, just an inch. The restraint that held Enzo together, the iron control he maintained over every aspect of his life, finally snapped. He made a low sound in his throat and pulled her to him, his uninjured arm wrapped around her waist, dragging her body flush against his. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with agonizing tenderness, before his mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was the taste of years of loneliness slamming into the present moment. It was hungry and demanding, fueled by the adrenaline of the danger they lived in. Enzo kissed her as if he were drowning and she was the air. Maya gasped against his lips, her hands curling into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. She felt the heat of him seeping into her skin, chasing away the cold of the drafty hallway. She opened to him, matching his intensity, her own pent-up emotions pouring into the kiss, the fear, the confusion, the undeniable attraction she had been fighting since the night at the penthouse. Enzo groaned, the sound vibrating against her lips. He deepened the kiss, tilting her head back, his fingers tangling in her hair. For a moment, there was no Mafia, no Rossies, no Storm. There was only the friction of their bodies and the desperate, frantic need to be closer. Flashlight beams swung around the corner at the far end of the hall. "Mr. Valenti," a guard's voice called out. "Sharp and alert. We've secured the breaker box." The reality of the world came rushing back in an instant. Enzo tore himself away from her, breathing hard. He stepped back, putting several feet of distance between them in a split second. His chest was heaving. His lips were swollen and red. He looked at Maya, his eyes wide, the pupil blown out, dark with desire and a sudden, crushing fear. Maya stood there, trembling, her hand hovering in the air where he had just been. "Clear the hall," Enzo barked at the guard, his voice cracking slightly before he steadied it. He turned back to Maya. He didn't touch her. He looked at her as if he had just committed a crime worse than any of the ones on his rap sheet. "This is dangerous," he whispered, the words rushing out. "For you, for the twins, for everything. We cannot do this. Enzo, go to your room. Maya, please." He turned and walked away into the shadows, his stride long and fast, as if he were fleeing a fire. Maya was left alone in the flickering red light, her lips still burning from his touch, painfully aware that a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world scoured clean and bright. The tension in the house, however, had not lifted. If anything, it was worse. Enzo avoided her completely at breakfast, leaving before she brought the twins down. Around noon, Nico found her in the playroom. "We need supplies for the nursery," he said. "Diapers, formula, specific brands we cannot get delivered securely right now. I am sending a team to the store. You need to go with them to identify what the kids need." Maya nodded, eager for any excuse to leave the suffocating atmosphere of the estate. The trip to the grocery store was a military operation. She rode in the armored SUV with 2 guards. Another car followed behind. Inside the store, one guard stayed 5 feet behind her while she pushed the cart, scanning the aisles with paranoid intensity. "I need to use the restroom," Maya told the guard when they were near the back of the store. "I have to check it first," the guard said. He pushed the door open, checked the stalls, and nodded. "Be quick. I will stand right here." Maya entered the restroom and splashed cold water on her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. Her eyes were wide and anxious. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss. When she turned to dry her hands, the door to the maintenance closet swung open. A man stepped out. He was not a guard. He wore a cheap beige suit and held a badge in his hand. "Miss Torres," he said. His voice was calm, bureaucratic. "Don't scream. I am Federal Agent Sterling. I need you to listen to me very carefully." Maya backed up against the sinks. "How did you get in here?" "We've been watching the Valenti estate for months," Sterling said. "We knew you would have to come out eventually." He pulled a manila folder from his jacket and tossed it onto the damp counter between them. It landed with a heavy slap. "Do you know who you are living with?" Sterling asked. Maya didn't answer. Sterling flipped the folder open. "Look at it." Maya looked. She couldn't help it. The photos were grainy surveillance shots, but they were clear enough. Enzo shaking hands with men who looked like predators. A warehouse floor littered with bodies covered in sheets. Stacks of cash wrapped in plastic. A photo of a car engulfed in flames. The ambush he had told her about? Or one he had ordered? "Lorenzo Valenti is not a misunderstood businessman," Sterling said, stepping closer. "He's the head of a criminal organization that moves drugs and weapons through this city. He has ordered hits. He has laundered millions." "You are living inside a crime fortress. Miss Torres, you are babysitting for a monster. He loves his children," Maya stammered, the defense weak even to her own ears. "Even monsters love their kids." Sterling said, cold, "That doesn't stop them from destroying everyone else's." He slid a business card onto the folder. "We can get you out. We can put you in witness protection. But we need something in return. We need access. We need to know his schedule. We need to know where he keeps the ledger." "I can't," Maya whispered. "If you stay, you are an accessory," Sterling said. "And when we take him down, and we will take him down, you will go down with him. Or worse, the Rossis will get to you first. Think about it." He tapped the card. "Help us. And you walk away clean. Help him, and you bury yourself." The door opened. The guard stuck his head in. "Everything okay, Miss Torres?" Sterling had vanished back into the maintenance closet as silently as a ghost. The folder was gone. Only the card remained on the wet porcelain of the sink. "I am fine," Maya said, her voice shaking. "Just washing my hands." She palmed the card and shoved it into her bra. Back at the estate, the silence was deafening. Maya went through the motions of the day, but her mind was reeling. The images from the folder burned behind her eyelids. The bodies, the violence. It was one thing to read about it on the internet. It was another to see the evidence laid out by a federal agent. Enzo came home late. He found her in the living room. The twins were asleep upstairs. Maya was sitting on the couch, staring at the unlit fireplace. Her knees pulled up to her chest. Enzo stopped in the doorway. He was still wearing his suit from the day. Tie loosened. He watched her for a long moment. He was hyper-observant. It was how he survived. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Something happened. He said, "It wasn't a question." Maya looked up. She could tell him. She could hand him the card. She could tell him about Sterling, but she didn't. She kept the secret pressed against her skin. "I am just tired," she said. Enzo walked into the room. He sat down on the coffee table in front of her, forcing her to look at him. His face was weary, the lines around his eyes deep. "I know this is hard," he said quietly. "I know you are scared." "I am not scared of the Rossies," Maya said softly. "Then what? I'm scared of what this is doing to us," she admitted. "To you." Enzo reached out. He brushed a stray strand of dark hair away from her face, his fingers lingering on her jawline. His touch was hesitant, as if he expected her to flinch. "If I were any other man," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would be on my knees right now. I would be begging you to stay. I would be promising you a future." He dropped his hand, looking down at the floor. "But I don't know how to offer you anything but risk. I look at you, and I see a target I painted on your back." Maya looked at him. She saw the killer the agent had described, but she also saw the man who had read Runaway Bunny to his children. She saw the man who had held her hand in the dark hallway. She leaned forward. She closed the distance between them until their foreheads were almost touching. She could feel his breath hitch. "I am not asking for promises." "Enzo," she whispered. "You should leave," he murmured, though he didn't pull away. "You should run as far as you can." "I can't," Maya said. "I am already in too deep." She wasn't talking about the job. She wasn't talking about the money. She was talking about her heart. Enzo let out a ragged breath. He cupped the back of her neck and pulled her in. This kiss was different from the one in the hallway. It was slower. It was aching and sweet and full of a terrible, beautiful sadness. It was a confession without words. Maya melted into him, her hands resting on his shoulders, feeling the solid weight of him anchoring her to the earth. Enzo's hand slid down her back, pulling her closer, the heat between them flaring up, threatening to consume them both. Maya felt herself surrendering, ready to forget the agent, the photos, the danger. The radio on Enzo's belt crackled to life, shattering the moment like glass. "Boss." Nico's voice cut through the silence. Sharp and urgent. "We have movement on the perimeter. Sector 4. Drone activity." Enzo pulled back instantly. The softness vanished from his face, replaced by the hard, cold mask of the dawn. He stood up, his hand going to the weapon he wore at the small of his back. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice devoid of the warmth that had been there seconds ago. "Do not go near the windows." He turned and strode out of the room, radio in hand, barking orders to his men. Maya sat alone on the couch, her lips tingling, the federal agent's card burning against her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, listening to the shouting outside, knowing that in this house, desire would always have to bow to danger. The war with the Rossi family did not arrive with a fanfare of trumpets. It arrived like a creeping rot, infecting the edges of Enzo's empire before striking the heart. It started with a warehouse fire in the industrial district that turned $3 million of inventory into ash. Then, a shipment of luxury cars was intercepted and riddled with bullets on the interstate. Key allies stopped returning calls, their phones ringing endlessly in empty offices. Inside the estate, the atmosphere was suffocating. Enzo spent his nights in the West Wing office, the heavy oak door shut against the sounds of the house. Maya would walk past late at night, seeing the sliver of light beneath the doorframe. Occasionally, she would bring him coffee, setting it silently on the desk while he stared at maps of the city spread out like autopsy reports. He looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes had deepened into crevices, and there was a permanent tension in his shoulders, as if he were holding up the ceiling of the mansion by sheer force of will. He was aging and fast forward, the burden of the crown crushing him by the hour. It was during one of these tense afternoons that Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a number she did not recognize. When she answered, the voice was calm, bureaucratic, and terrifying. "Miss Torres." Agent Sterling said, "We need to talk. Today." Maya tried to refuse, but Sterling played his ace immediately. "This isn't about you anymore, Maya. It is about the children. We have credible intelligence that the Rossi leadership has authorized a snatch and grab. They do not want to hurt Enzo. They want to take the twins to force his surrender." The blood drained from Maya's face. She looked across the courtyard where Leo and Sophia were chasing a rubber ball, their laughter echoing off the high stone walls. "Meet me," Sterling said, "or wait for the Rossis to come. It is your choice." Maya arranged the meeting with a desperation that made her reckless. She told Nico she needed feminine products that the guards kept forgetting to buy, insisting on a quick trip to the pharmacy. The security detail was tight, but Sterling was a professional. He met her in the back of the pharmacy parking lot, slipping into the back seat of the armored SUV while the guards were occupied with a stage distraction at the entrance. The meeting was short and brutal. Sterling showed her photos that made her stomach turn. A Rossi safe house with a room prepared for children, barred windows, a mattress on the floor. "If you help us arrest Valenti," Sterling said, leaning close, the smell of stale coffee on his breath, "we can place those kids in protective custody within the hour. Foster care, maybe. But they will be alive." "Foster care?" Maya repeated, her voice shaking. "You would take them from him? He's a criminal target. Maya, he's going down. The only question is whether he goes down in handcuffs or a body bag, and whether those kids are caught in the crossfire. Give us something. A time, a location." Maya looked at the photos, then at Sterling. She felt torn in half. She hated Enzo's world, but she knew how fiercely he loved his children. Taking them away would destroy him more thoroughly than any bullet. "I will not help you arrest him," Maya whispered, her hands clenched in her lap. "Then you are choosing to let them die." Sterling said cold. "No," Maya hissed. "I will tell you where the Rossis are. I will tell you what threats he is tracking. You take down the bad guys. Sterling, you do your job. But I'm not giving you Enzo. I want everyone alive. I do not want vengeance." She gave him the little information she had gleaned from overhearing Enzo's phone calls, names of Rossi lieutenants, locations of suspected fronts. She left the car feeling hollowed out, trembling with guilt. She had tried to thread the needle, to save the children without betraying the father, but as she walked back to the pharmacy, she felt like a traitor. Back at the estate, the rot was not just outside the walls, it was inside. Marco, one of Enzo's oldest lieutenants, sat in his car a mile from the gate, speaking into a burner phone. "The shift change is at 3 a.m, Marco said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The sensors on the east wall are glitching. I disabled the patch update. You will have a 5-minute window before the backup system cycles. On the other end of the line," a Rossi captain laughed. "Good work, Marco. When this is over, the city is yours." Marco hung up and drove through the gates, waving at the guards he had just sentenced to death. Inside the house, Maya felt eyes on her. It was Marco. He was standing in the foyer, talking to Nico, but his gaze was fixed on her as she walked the twins up the stairs. It was a strange look, calculating, cold, like a butcher assessing a cut of meat. It made her skin crawl, but when she turned back, he offered a thin, polite smile that did not reach his eyes. The night deepened. The wind picked up again, rattling the window panes. It was past 2 a.m. when the front door opened. There was a commotion in the hallway, hushed voices, the sound of heavy boots, and the metallic smell of blood. Maya was awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea. She stood up as Enzo stumbled into the room, supported by Nico. "Get the medical kit," Nico barked at a guard. "No," Enzo gritted out, pushing Nico away. "I am fine. It is just a graze. Go secure the perimeter. They knew we were coming." Someone talked. Nico hesitated, then nodded and left the room, taking the other men with him. Enzo stood by the sink, gripping the porcelain edge until his knuckles turned white. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, soaked in red. There was a gash on his cheekbone, and he was favoring his left leg. He looked like a man who had walked through hell. Enzo. Maya breathed. She didn't think. She went to the cabinet where she knew the first aid supplies were kept and pulled out the box. She filled a bowl with warm water and grabbed a clean cloth. "Leave it, Maya," Enzo said, his voice rough with pain. "Go to bed. Sit down," she ordered, her voice trembling but firm. Enzo looked at her. He seemed too tired to argue. He sank onto one of the kitchen stools, letting out a long, ragged exhale. Maya stepped between his legs. She dipped the cloth in the water and began to clean the wound on his cheek. Her hands were shaking, but her touch was gentle. She wiped away the grime and the blood, revealing the bruised skin beneath. Enzo watched her. His eyes were dark, burning with an intensity that unnerved her. He didn't wince as the water stung the cut. He just watched her face, tracking every flicker of emotion in her eyes. She moved to his shoulder. The bullet had grazed the deltoid, tearing a nasty furrow in the muscle but missing the bone. "This needs stitches," Maya whispered. "Butterfly strips will hold it," Enzo said. "Just clean it." Maya worked in silence. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. The house was quiet around them, a sleeping beast. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the scent of his skin, rain, gunpowder, and cedar. She could feel the heat radiating off him. She could feel the tension in his muscles, coiled tight like a spring. She finished bandaging the shoulder and looked down at his hands. His knuckles were raw. "You lost men tonight," she said softly. "Two," Enzo replied, his voice hollow. "Good men, fathers." Maya looked up at him. The sorrow in his face broke her heart. Without thinking, she reached up and cupped his jaw with both hands. "I am sorry," she whispered. Enzo closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. He let out a shuddering breath, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "I am so tired, Maya," he confessed, the words barely audible. "I am fighting a war I cannot win without becoming something I hate." "You are not him," Maya said fiercely, pulling back slightly to look him in the eye. "You are not the monster they say you are. I see you. I see the man who reads stories to his children. That is who you are." Enzo stared at her. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The restraint he had been holding onto for weeks finally shattered. He reached out with his uninjured hand and cupped the back of her neck, pulling her down, this time. The kiss was not an explosion. It was a drowning. It was slow, deep, and desperate. It was a plea for salvation. Maya made a small sound in her throat and melted against him. She slid her fingers into his hair, gripping the dark strands, anchoring herself to him. Enzo groaned low in his chest, his arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her easily as he pulled her onto his lap. Maya straddled his legs, pressing herself as close as she could get, needing to feel the life in him, needing to prove that they were both still here, still breathing. The kiss deepened, growing more heated, more frantic. Their breaths mingled, ragged and harsh in the quiet kitchen. Enzo's hand moved down her back, pressing her hips against his, the friction sending sparks of electricity through her veins. Maya forgot the agent. She forgot the Rossis. There was only this man, this moment, and the desperate need to be loved by him. Enzo pulled back for air, trailing kisses down her jawline to the sensitive hollow of her throat. Maya arched her back, her hands clutching his shoulders. "I want you," Enzo murmured against her skin, the vibration of his voice sending shivers through her. "I want you so much it hurts." He kissed his way back to her lips, his hand sliding up to cup her face again, but as their eyes met, something shifted in his gaze. The fog of desire cleared, replaced by a sharp, agonizing clarity. He froze. He looked at her flushed face, her swollen lips, the trust in her eyes, and he looked at the blood on his own shirt. "No," he whispered. He stopped. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing heavy and uneven. He squeezed his eyes shut. "I cannot do this to you," he rasped. "I refuse to drag you all the way down with me. You are clean, Maya. If I touch you, if I claim you, you will never be clean again." "Enzo, please," Maya whispered, tears stinging her eyes. He gripped her hips, ready to lift her off him, to push her away for her own good. Crack! The sound was sharp and distinct. It was not thunder. It was the sound of glass shattering. Then came the siren, a high-pitched, wailing alarm that screamed through the house. Enzo moved instantly. The lover vanished. The warlord returned. He shoved Maya off his lap and was on his feet in a second, reaching for the gun he had placed on the counter. "Get upstairs," Enzo shouted, grabbing her arm. "Get the twins." Gunfire erupted from the front of the house. Automatic weapons. The sound was deafening, a staccato rhythm of death. "They are inside." Enzo snarled. He shoved a keycard and a slip of paper into Maya's hand. "Go to the panic room in the master closet. The code is on the paper. Do not open that door for anyone but me or Nico. Anyone." He looked at her then. It was a look that lasted less than a second, but it carried a lifetime of regret. It was a goodbye. "Go!" he roared. Maya ran. She sprinted out of the kitchen and up the grand staircase. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would burst. Below her, the foyer exploded into chaos. Men in tactical gear were pouring through the smashed front doors. Valenti guards were returning fire. She reached the nursery. The twins were awake, screaming in their cribs, terrified by the noise. Maya grabbed them. She hoisted Leo onto her hip and grabbed Sophia's hand, dragging her out of the crib. "Run, baby, we have to run." Maya gasped. She pulled them into the hallway, heading for the master suite where the panic room was located. The hallway was full of smoke. "Maya!" She turned. Marco was standing at the intersection of the corridors. He was holding a gun, but he wasn't pointing it at the invaders. He was smiling. "Wrong way, sweetheart," Marco said, stepping toward her. Maya froze. The panic room was behind him. "Marco!" "Help us," she screamed. Marco shook his head. "The Rossis want the kids. Maya, hand them over and you walk out of here. Keep them and you die." The betrayal hit her like a physical slap. He was the leak. He was the one who had sold them out. Maya looked at the gun, then at the twins. A primal, feral rage surged up inside her. It drowned out the fear. "Go to hell," she spat. She didn't run away from him. She ran at him. Marco, expecting her to cower, was caught off guard. Maya swung the heavy bag of nursery supplies she had grabbed, filled with formula cans, and smashed it into his face with all her strength. Marco howled, stumbling back as blood gushed from his nose. Maya didn't stop. She kicked him hard in the shin, then shoved him into the wall. As he tried to raise the gun, she grabbed a heavy bronze vase from a hallway table and brought it down on his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. "Run!" Maya screamed at Sophia, scooping the girl up so she was carrying both children. Her muscles screaming under the weight. She abandoned the route to the panic room. Marco was blocking it. She turned and sprinted toward the service stairwell at the end of the hall, the narrow, hidden stairs the maids used. She burst through the door and slammed it shut, engaging the manual deadbolt just as Marco's body slammed against the other side. "Open the door!" Marco screamed, pounding on the wood. Maya ignored him. She stumbled down the stairs, clutching the weeping children, the sounds of the battle raging above and below them. She reached the basement level and huddled in the laundry room, hiding behind the massive industrial dryers. She pressed the twins' faces into her chest to muffle their cries, listening to the gunfire slowly die down. It took an hour before silence fell. Then footsteps, heavy, frantic. "Maya?" Enzo's voice echoed in the basement. "Maya, here," she sobbed. "We are here." Enzo appeared in the doorway. He was covered in blood, some his, mostly others. He looked wild, his eyes scanning the room until he landed on her. He dropped his gun and fell to his knees, sliding across the concrete to wrap his arms around all three of them. He buried his face in Maya's neck, shaking violently. "I thought I lost you." He choked out, "I thought he took you." "Marco," Maya whispered against his chest. "It was Marco." "I know," Enzo said grimly. "We found him. He's gone." He pulled back, looking at her. He touched her face, checking for injuries. Then he looked at the twins. They were terrified but unharmed. "We cannot stay here," Enzo said. His voice was hard, decisive. "The estate is compromised. The security grid is broken. The police will be here in 10 minutes, and the Rossis will be back in 2 hours. He stood up, pulling Maya to her feet. "Pack a bag," he ordered. "1 bag, essentials only." "We are leaving." "Leaving?" Maya asked dizzily. "Where?" "Anywhere but here," Enzo said. He looked at the wreckage of his home, at the life he had built that was now burning around him. Then he looked at Maya and the children. "If we want a future," Enzo said, gripping her hand, "we have to disappear. Tonight." Maya looked at him. The federal agent's card was still in her bra. The police were coming. She could stay. She could tell them everything. She could walk away. She looked at Enzo's bloody hand holding hers. She looked at the twins clinging to his legs. She squeezed his hand back. "Let's go," she said. The safe house was nothing like the estate. It was a rough-hewn cabin buried deep in the pine forests 3 hours north of Harborview, accessible only by a dirt road that was currently buried under 6 inches of fresh powder. There were no marble floors, no chandeliers, and no army of guards. There was only the wind whistling through the trees and the overwhelming, ringing silence of isolation. For the first 2 days, the quiet felt louder than the gunfire. Maya, Enzo, and the twins lived in a state of suspended animation. They slept on mattresses on the floor while Enzo swept the perimeter every hour, his eyes scanning the tree line for threats that had not yet arrived. The staff was minimal. Just one trusted older man named Silvio who cooked simple meals and kept watch at the gate down the road. The intimacy of the small space was suffocating and intoxicating all at once. There were no wings of the house to retreat to. They ate together at a small wooden table. They bathed the twins in a clawfoot tub that required boiling water on the stove. They were playing house at the end of the world. On the 3rd night, the temperature plummeted. The old generator that powered the cabin's heating system sputtered and died with a mechanical groan, plunging the temperature inside to near freezing. Enzo came back from the shed, shaking the snow from his hair. "The intake valve is frozen," he said, his breath pluming in the air. "It will take me until morning to fix it. We need to conserve heat." They moved the twins' mattresses into the main bedroom, piling every blanket they could find on top of the sleeping toddlers. But the cabin was drafty, the cold seeping through the floorboards. "We should share body heat," Enzo said. It was not a seduction. It was a tactical necessity. They lay down on the main bed, fully clothed under a mountain of wool blankets. The room was pitch black, the only light coming from the moon reflecting off the snow outside. Maya lay on her side, facing Enzo. She could not see him clearly, but she could feel him. She could feel the radiant heat of his body, the steady rise and fall of his chest. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, not with tension, but with the weight of everything they had survived. "Are you awake?" Enzo whispered. "Yes," Maya replied. Enzo shifted, his hand finding hers under the covers. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of violence, but his touch was gentle. He traced the line of her knuckles, a slow, hypnotic rhythm. "I am sorry about the estate," he said. "I'm sorry I could not keep it safe. It was just a house." Maya whispered, "We are safe here." Enzo let out a long breath. "We are safe for now. But Marco is still out there. He escaped the raid. He knows my patterns. He knows how I think. He will sell everything he knows to the Rossis to save his own skin." Maya tightened her grip on his hand. "We will figure it out. I already have," Enzo said. The tone of his voice made Maya's stomach drop. She shifted, trying to see his eyes in the dark. "What do you mean?" Enzo moved his hand up, his fingers brushing her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw. "I have the ledger. Maya, the one Agent Sterling wanted, it has everything, every payoff, every route, every account. It is enough to put the entire Rossi leadership in prison for life. And you?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "And me," Enzo admitted softly. "It destroys me, too. If I hand it over, the Valenti Syndicate ceases to exist. I cease to exist." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about the card Sterling had given her. She thought about the secret she had been carrying. "Enzo," she whispered, "I have to tell you something." "Tell me." "I met with him," she confessed. "Sterling. He cornered me at the store. He showed me the photos. He offered me a deal. If I helped them arrest you, they would protect the twins." Enzo went perfectly still. His hand stopped moving on her face. "I didn't do it," Maya rushed on, tears pricking her eyes. "I told him I wouldn't give you up. I only gave him information about the Rossis. I just wanted everyone to stay alive. I am so sorry I didn't tell you." She waited for the anger. She waited for him to pull away, to tell her she was just another betrayal in a life full of them. Instead, Enzo pulled her closer. His arm went around her waist, dragging her body flush against his until there was no space left between them. "You protected my children," he whispered into her hair. "You stood between them and the federal government, and you chose loyalty. You have nothing to apologize for." He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. "I am going to end this. Maya," he said, "I have set a meeting. Tomorrow night. An abandoned shipping warehouse near the docks. I am offering Marco and the Rossis a trade, the territory for my life." "No," Maya gasped, pulling back to look at him. "It is a trap," Enzo explained. "Sterling and his team will be waiting. I am handing Marco and the Rossi leadership to them on a silver platter." "But you will be there," Maya said. "You will be in the middle of it." "I have to be the bait," Enzo said. "It is the only way to ensure they all show up. And once it is done, I surrender. I give Sterling the ledger. I trade my freedom for yours and the twins." "You are talking about going to prison," Maya said, her voice rising in panic. "You are talking about leaving us. I am talking about giving you a future," Enzo said fiercely. "A future where you do not have to hide in a frozen cabin. A future where Leo and Sophia can go to school without armed guards." He gripped her face with both hands, forcing her to look at him in the shadows. "I would burn the world down for them, Maya. But I am realizing that to save them, I have to burn myself down instead." "Don't," Maya begged, a tear sliding down her nose. "Please don't say that." She climbed onto him, straddling his waist, not caring about the cold air that rushed in as the blankets shifted. She grabbed his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists. "We can run," she said. "We can go somewhere they will never find us." "They will always find us," Enzo said. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and resignation. "This is the only way out," Maya sobbed, a broken sound. She leaned down and kissed him. It was a kiss of desperation, of terror, of a love that had bloomed in the most impossible soil. Enzo met her with equal force. His hands roamed over her back, memorizing the curve of her spine, the softness of her skin. They kissed until their lungs burned, trying to say everything they couldn't put into words. "I love you," Enzo whispered against her lips. The confession hung in the cold air, fragile and absolute. "I love you too." Maya wept. "So please come back to me. I will try," he promised. The next evening, the sky was a bruised purple over the harbor. The abandoned shipping warehouse stood like a rotting tooth on the edge of the water, its metal siding groaning in the wind. Enzo stood in the center of the vast, empty floor. He was alone. He wore his long black coat, his hands visible and empty. He looked like a king standing amidst the ruins of his kingdom. Maya was not at the safe house. Enzo had ordered her to stay, but she had refused to be left behind while he walked to his execution. She was in a nondescript van parked 3 blocks away, watching a grainy video feed from a hidden camera on Enzo's lapel. Next to her sat Agent Sterling, his face grim, a headset pressed to his ear. "He is exposed," Sterling muttered. "If they start shooting before we get into position, he is dead." "He knows what he is doing," Maya said, though her fingernails were digging into her palms so hard they drew blood. Headlights swept across the warehouse walls. 3 black SUVs rolled inside, their engines echoing in the cavernous space. Doors opened. Marco stepped out first. He looked battered. His nose was taped, and his arm was in a sling, courtesy of Maya. He was smiling, but it was a nervous, twitchy expression. Behind him walked the head of the Rossi family, an older man with silver hair and eyes like a shark. They were flanked by 10 armed men. "You came alone," Marco called out, his voice echoing. "I am impressed. Enzo, I thought you would be halfway to Mexico by now. I am done running." "Marco," Enzo said, his voice calm and amplified by the silence. "I am here to make a deal." The Rossi Don stepped forward. "There is no deal. Valenti, you have nothing left. Your house is burned. Your men are scattered. We take the city. You die. That is the deal." Enzo reached into his coat. Every gun in the room was raised instantly. Enzo moved slowly, pulling out a thick, leather-bound book, the ledger, Enzo said. It contains the routing numbers for every account I own. It also contains the evidence of your payoffs to the Port Authority, the mayor, and the police chief. He threw the book onto the concrete floor between them. It landed with a heavy thud. You can kill me, Enzo said, but if you do, copies of this go to the FBI, the press, and the IRS within the hour. Or, you let my children go, you let them disappear, and I walk away. The city is yours. The Rossi Don looked at the book. Greed flickered in his eyes. Kill him. The Don said, and take the book. Marco raised his gun. Now, Enzo shouted. The skylights shattered inward. Flashbang grenades dropped from the catwalks, exploding in blinding flashes of white light and deafening bangs. Federal agents rappelled down from the rafters. Armored vehicles smashed through the warehouse doors, sirens blaring. Federal agents, drop your weapons! Chaos erupted. The Rossi men opened fire blindly. The agents returned fire with precision. In the van, Maya screamed as the camera feed on Enzo's lapel went wild. She saw the floor rushing up, heard the grunt of impact. I am going in, Maya yelled, throwing the van door open. Miss. Torres, stay back, Sterling shouted, but she was already running. Maya sprinted toward the warehouse. The sounds of war spilled out into the night. She didn't care about the bullets. She didn't care about the danger. She only cared about the man inside. Inside. The warehouse was a hellscape of smoke and strobing lights. Enzo had rolled behind a crate when the shooting started. He saw Marco trying to flee toward a side exit. Enzo broke cover. He tackled Marco, slamming him into a rusted support beam. The two men went down in a tangle of limbs. Marco clawed at Enzo's face. Screaming in rage, Enzo fought with cold, brutal efficiency. He blocked a punch, delivered a knee to the ribs, and then a heavy right hook that sent Marco sprawling. Marco fumbled for a gun on the floor. Enzo kicked it away. It is over, Marco! Enzo yelled. Marco pulled a knife from his boot. He lunged. Enzo caught his wrist, but not before the blade sliced deep into his side, right below his healing ribs. Enzo grunted, staggering back. Marco lunged again, but a shot rang out. Marco jerked. He looked down at the red blossoms spreading on his chest. A federal agent stood 20 feet away. Weapon raised. Marco collapsed, his eyes glassy. Enzo fell to his knees, pressing a hand to his side. The blood was coming fast, hot and dark. Enzo! He looked up through the haze. Maya was running toward him, dodging the swarming agents. She slid to her knees beside him, her hands instantly covering his on the wound. No, 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 she sobbed. Stay with me. Look at me. You followed me. Enzo wheezed, a faint smile touching his lips. You stubborn woman. I love you, Maya cried, pressing harder on the wound. You do not get to leave me. You do not get to leave the twins. You promised. Enzo reached up, his bloody hand cupping her cheek. He smeared red on her skin, but neither of them cared. Family, he whispered. You are family, Maya. His eyes rolled back. Enzo, Maya screamed. Medics, Sterling shouted, appearing above them. Get a team over here, now. The world dissolved into a blur of white lights and shouting voices. Maya refused to let go of his hand, even as they lifted him onto the stretcher. She ran alongside him all the way to the ambulance, her coat stained with his blood, her heart breaking and beating all at once. The fall of the Rossi family was swift and absolute. With the leadership arrested at the warehouse and the evidence from Enzo's ledger, the organization crumbled within days. The news cycle was dominated by the biggest organized crime bust in Harborview history. But the real negotiation happened in a quiet hospital room. Enzo survived. The knife had missed his vital organs, though the blood loss had been severe. He spent 3 days in the ICU, handcuffed to the bed. Sterling stood at the foot of the bed. The prosecutor wants 20 years, Sterling said. Enzo looked at Maya, who was sitting in the chair beside him, holding his hand. I gave you everything, Enzo rasped. The Rossis, the corrupt politicians, my own operation. Sterling nodded. You did. And that is why we are offering a deal. No prison, but the Lorenzo Valenti who ran Harborview has to die. You go into the program. Witness protection, relocation, strict supervision for 5 years. You step one toe out of line, and you go to federal prison for the rest of your life. And Maya, Enzo asked, "The children? They can go with you," Sterling said, "if they choose to." Enzo looked at Maya. It was a question. He was offering her an out. She could walk away now. She could go back to her life, clean and safe. Maya squeezed his hand. "Where we go together." 6 months later, the town was small, a cluster of pastel-colored houses clinging to the edge of the Pacific coast, thousands of miles from the snow and gray concrete of Harborview. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. The frantic pace of the city felt like a bad dream here. Life was slow. Life was simple. At the end of a cobblestone street, a small cafe had opened. It served the best espresso in town and pastries that tasted like they were made in Italy. Enzo wiped down the counter, the rhythmic motion soothing. He wore a simple white t-shirt and an apron. The sling was gone, though he sometimes rubbed his side when the rain came in, and he looked different. The tension that had defined him for years was gone. He looked younger, lighter. The bell above the door chimed. Maya walked in carrying a crate of fresh oranges from the market. She was tanned, her hair loose and windblown. She looked happy. "Heavy?" Enzo asked. "Coming around the counter?" "I got it." She smiled. He took the crate from her anyway, setting it down on a table. Then he pulled her into his arms. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of desperation or fear. It was a kiss of peace. It was slow and lingering, tasting of coffee and sunlight. Enzo cradled her face, his thumbs brushing over her skin as if he still couldn't believe she was real, that she was here. "Mama, Mama!" The back door burst open. Leo and Sophia ran in, sandy-footed and shrieking with laughter. They were taller now, brown from the sun. Maya broke the kiss and knelt down. Opening her arms, the twins slammed into her, a tangle of small limbs and wet swimsuits. "Did you see the crab?" Leo shouted. "It was huge." Maya laughed, hugging them tight. "I missed it. You will have to show me tomorrow." Enzo stood back, leaning against the counter, watching them. His arms were crossed over his chest. He looked out the back door at the ocean stretching to the horizon. Sometimes, at night, he still woke up sweating, the sound of gunfire echoing in his ears. He still checked the locks 3 times before bed. The scars on his body would never fade. But then he looked at Maya. He looked at the twins calling her Mom. He looked at the life they had built on the ashes of his past. He walked over and wrapped his arm around Maya's shoulders as she stood up. She leaned into him, her arm going around his waist. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I am thinking we made it," Enzo murmured. Maya looked up at him. "We did." He kissed her forehead. "We have a future," Enzo said, the wonder evident in his voice. "A real one." Maya smiled, resting her head on his shoulder as they watched the twins run back out onto the sand. "Whatever comes next," she promised, "we face it together." They stood there in the golden light of the setting sun, not as a mafia boss and a delivery girl, but as 2 scarred souls who had walked through the fire and chosen love over fear. And for the first time in 100 years, the silence was not heavy. It was beautiful. Thank you so much for reading this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Enzo and Maya. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please make sure to subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an upload. Share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. I read every single one. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.